The use of pants is so common in our daily life that we rarely think about the cultures that rejected them, especially in ancient Rome, where pants were seen as an inappropriate garment, even a symbol of barbarism. Today, pants are considered essential in the wardrobes of many people worldwide, used both for everyday activities and more formal occasions. However, in the time of the Roman Empire, pants were something completely foreign to their clothing, and they were associated with cultures outside the empire's borders. In this video, we will explore why the Romans rejected such a functional garment, and how this rejection was deeply rooted in their values and cultural traditions. Why didn't the Romans adopt pants, even when other northern cultures were already using them? Let's find out. The cultural importance of Roman clothing. In ancient Rome, clothing was not just about comfort or protection from the weather. Clothes were a powerful symbol of identity, social status, and morality. For the Romans, clothing did not just cover the body, but it showed a person's position in the social hierarchy, and it was used to distinguish free citizens from slaves, aristocrats from plebeians, and Romans from the barbarians living outside their borders. One of the clearest examples of this was the toga, a heavy, formal, and symbolic garment worn by Roman citizens during ceremonies and public events. This garment not only represented their citizenship, but was also a clear signal of their place in Roman society. The toga was reserved for free men of high status, and those who wore it were therefore showing their connection to Roman civilization, considered the cradle of culture, law, and politics. Although not very practical, the toga became an undisputed symbol of Roman identity. On the other hand, pants were a garment associated with the northern European peoples, such as the Germans, Celts, and barbarians, who lived in much colder climates than Rome. For the Romans, wearing pants represented something completely foreign to their concept of civilization. The Romans believed that pants were a garment that, beyond being practical, denoted a lack of refinement, since the people who wore them did not meet the cultural, artistic, and philosophical standards they deeply valued. The toga, symbol of status. And tradition, the toga mentioned earlier, was the icon of Roman clothing. For the Romans, wearing the toga was an act of affirmation of their civilization, and the garment was not just a fashion element, but a reflection of their values. Throughout Roman history, the toga was seen as the most important symbol of their identity. It was a garment designed to highlight the importance of the Roman citizen in public life. Magistrates, senators, and people of high rank wore more elaborate togas, while plebeians, the lower classes, wore simpler versions. This difference in clothing helped define Roman social hierarchy. The toga represented more than just Roman culture. It was the cornerstone of their civic identity. For the Romans, there was no greater symbol of citizenship and honor than wearing a toga. This garment distinguished Romans from the so-called barbarian peoples, who wore pants and other garments that did not meet the proper standards of Roman fashion. For this reason, the idea of adopting pants was rejected. It would not only be a cultural surrender, but also a threat to Roman superiority, to the very concept of what it meant to be civilized. Pants, a symbol of barbarism and primitivism that eternal. Roman rejection of pants was deeply rooted in their perception of foreign peoples and their customs. The Romans believed that civilization was defined not just by technology, art, and laws, but also by the way people dressed. Pants were associated with the barbarian peoples of the north, such as the Germans, the Celts, and other groups living in the colder regions of the empire. These cultures, facing harsh climatic conditions, needed functional clothing to protect them from the cold, and for this reason, pants became an essential garment. However, in the eyes of the Romans, pants represented more than just a piece of clothing. They were a symbol of rawness, of the lack of civilization. To them, the peoples who wore pants lacked the elegance and refinement of the Romans, who saw the toga as the ultimate symbol of distinction. Thus, pants were not only rejected for being practical, but because they represented a lifestyle that Rome considered primitive. Pants in the north, practical but rejected. Although pants were an essential garment for northern peoples due to the climate, in Rome, their acceptance was delayed and never total. For centuries, The Romans remained faithful to their traditions and continued to wear garments like the toga and tunic, which, despite not being practical in cold climates, perfectly fit their cultural norms. Roman soldiers stationed in the coldest regions of the empire, such as Britannia or Germania, began to adopt pants as part of their uniform to cope with the extreme temperatures. However, this adoption was never seen as a cultural decision, but rather a functional necessity. Romans in the warmer areas of the empire, such as the Mediterranean, never adopted pants as part of their everyday attire. In fact, southern regions never had the need to adapt to this garment, as their warm climate favored the use of tunics and togas. Practicality over aesthetics. Soldiers' adaptation. Although Roman culture never adopted pants, soldiers patrolling the empire's borders, particularly those living in cold regions like Northern Europe, saw pants as a necessary garment for their survival. Roman tunics, ideal for the Mediterranean heat, were not warm enough to withstand the extreme temperatures of the north. Pants provided the flexibility and protection needed for the intense cold, which led some soldiers to adopt this garment, despite the laws and norms that rejected it. It is interesting to note that despite the pragmatic acceptance of pants among Roman soldiers in cold regions, this garment was never seen as anything other than foreign and barbaric by Roman society. It was only when the Roman Empire began to decline and Roman customs and norms fragmented that some foreign ideas and garments, like pants, began to slowly infiltrate Roman culture. The long evolution of Roman fashion and the late adoption of pants. The process of adopting pants was long and full of contradictions. While soldiers on the borders of the empire wore them for practical reasons, the rest of the empire continued to resist adopting them. In fact, even with the fall of the Western Roman Empire, the use of pants by Romans was still very limited and was more associated with border troops and military life. The acceptance of pants was never seen as a central fashion in Roman life, and their adoption was seen more as a cultural curiosity than a radical change in everyday attire. As the empire split and the borders of the Roman Empire began to crumble, influences from other peoples and cultures began to penetrate Roman life. However, even in these times of change, the toga and Roman traditions remained highly valued. Despite the lack of full acceptance of pants in Roman society, their legacy and the influence of Roman clothing continued in much of the Western world. The Roman rejection of pants reflects the deep connection that Rome had with its cultural traditions. Clothing was not just a functional accessory, but a reflection of Roman identity, a sign of what it meant to be part of an advanced civilization. Although pants were seen as a practical necessity for soldiers in the northern regions, in the Rome of the great emperors, pants were more than just a simple garment. They were a symbol of the constant struggle between the traditional and the practical, between the old and the new. The Romans may have rejected pants because of their association with barbarian peoples, but circumstances, climate, and the need for adaptation eventually forced some of them to adopt this garment. However, this adoption was never fully accepted or culturally validated by Roman society, showing how traditions, no matter how practical, can be difficult to change, even in the face of necessity. This story is a reminder of how cultures are defined not only by what they adopt, but by what they reject. And in the case of the Romans, the rejection of pants was a way of staying true to their identity and to the customs that defined them as the most advanced civilization of antiquity. The Roman rejection of pants is a fascinating example of how clothing not only serves a practical function, but also reflects a deep cultural identity. The Romans, always proud of their civilization, saw pants as an alien garment, something that didn't belong to their world. For them, togas, tunics, and the garments they chose represented their place in history, their status, and their morality. Now imagine you could choose between the traditional Roman togas or adapt to the pants of the northern barbarians. What would you choose? Would you identify with the sophistication of Rome or seek the practical comfort of pants? Leave your opinion in the comments, and don't forget to like the video if you found this historical curiosity interesting. Also, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any fascinating content about ancient Rome and its culture. See you in the next video.